Good evening. Welcome to Photo Live with Grabowsky and Kiron. My name is Elias Redstone, and I'm the Artistic Director of Photo 2021 International Festival of Photography, taking place in Melbourne and across regional Victoria from the 18th of February to the 7th of March. I would like to begin by acknowledging the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional owners of the land on which I live, and I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Thank you for joining us for Photo Live, as we invite more photographers and artists to discuss the social and cultural role photography plays in our everyday lives. Photo Live is supported by Creative Victoria and the Australia Council for the Arts, and expands on Photo 2021's festival theme, exploring the relationship between photography and the truth. Previous talks from this series and previous Photo Live series are available to watch on photo.org.au. And today I'm very pleased to introduce two Melbourne-based artists, Guy Grabowsky and Kiron Robinson. Guy Grabowsky's practice explores the photographic medium, all aspects of its involvement, its role in our shifting realities, how it looks at us, and how we perceive its usefulness. Guy creates photographs with and without the camera, using unconventional and traditional analog digital techniques. Through intervention and grouping, each image is providing with a new narrative and conceptual framework. His current exhibition, Symbionts, at Station, continues his exploration into the ways in which images are created, reproduced, deleted, edited, copied, and pasted to create a warped perception of truth and reality. Symbionts is presented as part of Photo 2021's expanded program of exhibitions taking place throughout the year, but due to restrictions, the exhibition can currently only be viewed online. Kiron Robinson is an artist and educator, lecturer at Victorian College of the Arts. In his words, he loves photographs but does not trust them. He uses a number of photographic strategies in different mediums to interrogate the image. His work circulates around a set of ideas that he recognizes in the photograph: belief and doubt, and the ability to believe except through doubting. He has exhibited widely and has also curated a number of exhibitions questioning the current photographic condition, including at Westbase and Benalla Art Gallery. He's curated a new exhibition, Not for the Sake of Something More, at Sarah Scout Presents in Melbourne for Photo 2021. Hello, Guy and Kiron.
Hello, Elias.
Thanks for joining us. I'm going to disappear and let you have a conversation, and I'll be back in about 40 minutes to ask any questions we've received from the audience. So sure. Have a nice chat, and I'll see you shortly.
Thanks, Elias.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
Hi, Guy.
Hey, Kiron, how's it going?
Good. It's good to see you again. Nice to see people, even if it's in Zoom.
Oh, likewise. Yeah.
I see a lot of my family, not a lot of anyone else. Hey, I thought it would be nice to, one, congratulations on your show. It looks amazing. Even if we're watching it online or looking at it through an online presence. And I thought maybe that's a really interesting place for us to start, because you and I, we've known each other for a number of years, and we've had various conversations about photography, and I think there's something that we both kind of explore in our work. But I'm really curious what, from your perspective, the experience of having a photographic exhibition, so an exhibition which is the works are photographic, but then where it's being engaged with online, so it's being engaged with as photographs. So photographs are photographs.
Mm-hmm.
How have you found that? How have you found it?
Well, I mean, it's a strange kind of circumstance, isn't it? I think, it's a constant sort of, adapting to the environment, and, it's been kind of interesting. I think in a sense, photography, does lend itself quite well to being exhibited online, because, we're always looking at images online anyway. Essentially, what we look at in terms of online content is photography, that it is images. You know, I've been, you know, I mean, my work is very large scale and tactile. So it's made to be seen in person. It's not, I don't see, you know, necessarily the exhibition online, being exhibited online is a substitute, but it kind of creates another conversation about sort of the viewing of art and what that exactly entails.
Mm.
For example, like, you know, I mean, we've talked about this a bit in the past, but the digital image is information. You know, it's not a physical thing.
Yeah.
And for me, I've been thinking about, well, you know, the relationship between information and the art, you know, physical object, and sort of, you know, what is more important, you know, which thing informs the other thing, you know. And I think it's yeah.
I was gonna say, did you get to any conclusions there? Did you?
Well,
Solve the world problem.
It links, I think well, it links back to that idea, that conversation about photography and truth. You know, for example, you're looking at this exhibition online, you can't prove it actually exists. You know, is it a mock-up? You know, it poses kind of, for me at least, it poses these kind of questions about authenticity and all these things. I can't remember who wrote it, but I was reading an article during my honors year, and the article was kind of talking about the idea that you know, theoretically you could have an artwork which, you know, doesn't exist. For an example, you know, I could be like, oh, I'm holding this amazing artwork in my hand. It's the most, you know, incredible thing I've ever made.
Yeah.
And then someone talks about that work, and then someone writes about that work, and suddenly it's published in the New York Times. That for me is kind of like what exhibiting online is like. It's like, it's just exhibiting information.
Yeah.
But you know, that's not critical. I think that's just kind of fascinating. And it's these kinds of things which I find fascinating about photography and our relationship to images, particularly within the, you know, sort of the environment of fake news and, you know, all these different things.
Yeah. That's a beautifully succinct example you're giving there. Because you know, I was thinking about with your work, like so much of it is about, you know, scale and surface, but being kind of able to scrutinize the surface. And you know, I think, you know, I've got a iPhone SE, so it's only that big. So when I look at your exhibition on my phone, you know, your images are a couple of, your photographs are reduced to being a couple of inches high. Yeah, I guess I can zoom in, but then I don't get a sense of the bit that I see in relation to the whole image. Yeah, and I don't know, I was just thinking about that relationship and the difference, I guess, in those two places, and that sense of, you know, does one start to lead the other, or, you know, like if you sell out, you know, you're great. Yeah. I'm going to do all online. Would you do that, guy?
I mean, like, I've always thought about an artwork never really being finished because it exists online, and I think that really informs the artwork over time. You know, it perhaps starts, you know, in the studio, and then you know, eventually hopefully goes into a physical environment, say a gallery, and then the show comes down. But I don't think that's where the artwork, you know, stops existing. And, you know, now, you know, well, it's been happening for quite a while now. Artworks are photographed, and then they're you know, distributed online, and people come across it maybe, you know, years later from, you know, looking at an old, you know, Instagram repost or something like that. But I think it's important to acknowledge that as being part of the art, because that's how we exhibit art these days, particularly through Instagram. Like me personally, I, follow a lot of galleries and look at art probably every day, online. And I think that almost informs the kind of art I make. I think we're almost living in a time where you could say, like, you envision your work, like how, like when you're making it, how will you envision it, looking up, scrolling on Instagram and it popping up,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. But that's such an active.
I'm going a bit of a tangent, but yeah.
No, that's right. I think it's kind of interesting because you have a very specific mode of production and the way you make your work. And you do use both sort of digital and analog techniques, and there is a kind of embedding in the analog that you require in your work, and you've gone to so some really big lengths to make that happen. What's your, and hearing you speak like this, it's interesting to think about that. And I guess I'm asking, what do you feel so intrinsic about needing to have that part of the process in your work? Why do you need that kind of analog part, which requires everything, it requires a human to do something, or it requires big rooms and dark spaces and machines and all that. And in your case, I don't know, maybe tell us a little bit about how you make some of your work, and as a way to approach that question.
Sure. Maybe I'll start doing a screen share.
That would be great.
Yeah. Let's go back. So yeah, I mean, these are just documentation of the show currently open at Station. To answer your question about why do I make images in such a sort of physical way in the darkroom, to answer that, I guess it's because I suppose in a way very aware of the expectations photography has, that I think people are very used to seeing images and particular kinds of images. And I guess the way I think about it is, what kind of images do I want to contribute to that? And then from that, I'm like, well, I don't really want to I want to make images which perhaps people wouldn't even necessarily associate with photography or with their idea of what an image is. I mean, these works, I think in a conventional sense, don't really identify as photographs as what generally people think of photographs to be. And I think that's kind of interesting. And I find working with the analog processes allow me to.
Can you expand that? What do you mean by, I think it's really interesting what you're saying. Can you just expand, what do you mean by they don't identify as what for conventional photographic images?
Yeah, well, I mean, what do I mean by that? Well, it's a difficult question to answer. I mean, I suppose, well, these images are made not using conventional processes which you normally associate with photography.
Yeah.
So I'll go into the process essentially. So the exhibition here, there's 6 works in the space, 7 images in total, because one of the works comprises 2 images. Each image has been printed in the darkroom and is the result of photographic experimentation, which I've spent quite a long time trying to configure. And there's 2 kinds of images in this exhibition. So For example, one kind, these kind of very analog sort of alchemic looking images, which have been printed from an analog film negative, in conjunction with these digital looking images. It's a bit hard to see via the screen, but I'll just zoom in and maybe you get a better idea. This is kind of like degraded, sort of pixelated surface to it. You can see in these blue dots, sort of digital information. And these are made, let's get out of that. Oh yeah, it's fine. These are made by printing in the darkroom through a digitally created negative. So the digital negatives are made firstly by selecting an image, which I've captured using a camera. The image is then degraded using the computer, photographic software, digitally mark making on the image and playing around with the pixels. Then once I'm happy with that, the image is printed onto a sheet of acetate and then printed, and then that's printed in the darkroom. So it goes through a process of rematerialization from digital to analog, and that further degrades the image. And so what essentially you're looking at in these works are the layering of surfaces, the layering of process, and that is essentially the image. With these images, they're made by having negatives which have been exposed to light. So there's no camera involved, they're just simply exposed. They're then processed in the darkroom using chemicals, and I allow the chemicals to not wash off the film surface. I let them set into the film surface. So it creates this amalgamation of textures which bind together to form a kind of composition. And then once that happens, I perform a series of mark making, and I paint onto the negative, and I mark the negative. I embed symbols and different things which are quite personal, and then they're printed in the darkroom. And the title of the exhibition, Symbionts, for those who may not know what symbiont means, basically it refers to the living together, two organisms living together in a kind of symbiosis. And, I use the term, quite ambiguously, but essentially the two organisms living together in this exhibition are the analog and the digital, and how they communicate with one another, both from a physical point of view in the space, but also how the analog and digital processes kind of work together. And through that sort of, asking questions about the evolution of photography from using, old analog process like printing darkroom and all these things. But also, oh yeah, you go.
Yeah, oh no, I was going to say it's interesting to hear speaking about it like that, because it's still kind of what what you're saying about the surface carrying. You didn't quite say a residue, but I'll just say that. So excuse me, a residue of like the processes, or indication of the processes that have been that the image has undergone to come into being. That yeah, it's an interesting kind of description, because it's sort of, in a way, that's a very historical way of thinking with regards to photography, in that kind of indexical representational function of the photographic image. You're just using, you're not just, sorry, you're using the current technologies and mixing them and creating a sense of questioning around that, where I guess previously, historically, when the camera would point at something and would see the thing, you're kind of pointing at the process itself. Would that be right? Would you agree with what I'm saying there?
Yeah, definitely. You know, I came to these images via a desire to make an image which didn't necessarily index to the world which we live in, but index to itself as an image, and therefore index to sort of its own sort of being of like being a photographic thing. Or indexing to the processes, you know, which make it, which is a sort of may not make total sense, but I guess what I'm trying to get at is that there's a sort of very there's a connection between photography documenting our environment, and I guess I just wanted to make sort of open up that sort of, or question that connection via, I know, changing people's perception of images don't necessarily have to do that, or they can do that in a different kind of context, I suppose.
I guess that's sort of it's raising that question of what can the photographic what can photographs show us anymore? Like because that we're so understanding now of the possibilities of or the suspicions of what the photograph is showing us. This is we're naturally suspicious of what we see, no matter what it is. You know, it's a photo of my grandma. You know, I don't believe that necessarily. What filter's been put on top of that? You know, she's looking great today. Is that really how she? Whatever. We have that question. It's just like built into us by this stage. But then we come across lots of images like this, which maybe I'd suggest that they're shocking us out of it because we don't so easily comprehend what they are. We kind of see the photographic first, and then start to try and delve into what is it we're actually seeing.
It makes me think of so it makes me think of another work by an artist who I you know, I think talk quite a lot about, Thomas Ruff. One of his series, maybe, you know, his most sort of well-known series, are these massive portraits of people, just very simple, just staring straight into the camera lens, and it's almost like a passport photo. And you know, those images were originally quite small when he first made them, and he exhibited them, and he found when people looked at these images, because there were photos of his friends and people and other colleagues, when people looked at them, they're like, oh, that's a photo of Jessica, that's a photo of you know, John, or whoever that might be. And that wasn't the point he was trying to convey. So then he made them really large, and it's just by increasing their scale that people realize, no, this isn't a photo of Jessica, this is simply a photo. You know, and and I think maybe that's what I'm trying to get at with using these processes, is that people become sort of hyper aware that they're looking at a photo, and what does that mean? Because we're so used to kind of looking at images of things. I think that's, you know, it creates an interesting dialogue.
It's an interesting I feel like it's an interesting strategy. More and more artists maybe who use the photographic are employing, and kind of like in a way declaring the medium first as a way to then be able to start to talk about other things. I was thinking part of a conversation the other day with Australian artist living in London, Chantel Faust, who's head of contemporary art at the RCA at the moment, and she was talking about I think she was summarizing another quote, but she couldn't remember who she was summarizing. So I'm summarizing her, summarizing someone else, saying, you scratch at a surface and what you get is more surface. And I feel like that's kind of, that's the real, for me, it's the exciting thing with photography. It's all surface. And there's this, it's like a desire for it to be more than that. And it talks to that desire, but the problem with desire is it's unattainable, because once you attain it, it no longer is desirable, and it's no longer enacting its desire. And I think that's the really interesting part about photography now, is that kind of reference to its own can you be surfaceness, or surfality or something? I don't know what the word is there, but itself as its own surface and nothing beyond its surface. And so I think about those roof portraits in that manner. Like, they are not, Jennifer or whoever. They're not that. They're just a photograph. They're just a surface.
I totally agree about the surface, and that's photography captures the surface of things. And I think about that quite literally, just the processes of creating surfaces, and then the work is all about embedding surfaces within the print. But it's interesting that you talk about that you use the word desire, because I think also photography within a sort of I guess more mainstream, perhaps commercial perspective is almost about desire. It's about achieving a kind of almost, chasing the idea of perfection, making images higher saturation and sharper and higher resolution, and then inventing technologies and new cameras that come out which is able to make an even better image than the previous, and so forth. The other thing which drives these works in particular in reference to that is the JPEG, and that's kind of like the ubiquitous image is the JPEG, the image, I guess, and how the JPEG is a compressed file, and that images are constantly printed and copied and reproduced and then scanned again, and it becomes more and more degraded over time. And the processes which I use to make these works are all processes which essentially destroy the negative. For example, not washing off the chemicals, allowing the chemicals to sit, painting the negative. Actually, I mark these negatives with nails sometimes, I'm really, embedding, scratching it, and even with these, these are compressed and they're printed onto a sheet of acetate, very low resolution, and then they're expanded to quite a large scale. And so I'm very interested in what results from destroying images, and the image that then presents itself through that degradation, through that destruction. I think that's, would you say that's something that is quite relevant in your work as well?
Yeah. I was going to say, could I borrow the screen sharing for a second?
Yeah.
So you have to stop your screen sharing.
Oh, right. Yeah.
There we are. It's good to see you. I totally agree with you there. I'm very interested in that, the compressing and expanding that occurs with images and image production. In a way that's also really coming out of analog photography, in that you always had that question about the size of what negative you're going to use. Use a 35mm neg, you get a certain amount of info. Then you can go up to 6.6 or 6.7 or 6.9, and 5.4, and then you get an 8x10 neg, and you can get more info. And we're basically talking about compression values, and that translates to digital, where yes, you you're constantly compressing in images, and each time there's this transference of information that disappears or appears, and more information fills in the space and it disappears under the next compression. So I'm just going to quickly share this. So for me, it's something I think about a lot. So that idea of that translating through re-photographing images. So I often shoot stuff which I find in magazines, and then I'll shoot maybe on a low, maybe on my iPhone, because I've usually got it in my pocket, but then taking that out, printing it, then scanning that on a flatbed scanner at quite a high resolution to then generate another image. So just in that process, that what is gained and what is lost through each step, and just through the variety of sort of, I guess, the photographic processes or the cameras that exist, things like that. And then trying to ask those questions that you're asking, coming at it another way, asking people to re-see how they're seeing images, or how the images seem to exist in their, in their mind, in their life, how, just not taking it for that granted, but seeing it as its image first.
Yeah, I like the way that you often revisit the magazine as kind of this almost vessel which contains images.
Yeah.
What is it about the magazine which you keep revisiting to?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's a really fascinating medium, because the photos in certain magazines are really beautiful, and it's had such a history of this type of romanticism of its subject, whether it's something like National Geographic or Italian Vogue or something. The image that they use sort of is used in its this kind of propaganda form to really generate desire. And, there's so many to go through. But at the same time, it itself is such a surface. Magazine pages there's kind of infra thin, and you hold it up and you can actually see the other side coming through. And so you get these weird hybrid images that appear, and I just think that they're amazing spaces to encounter photographs and see them for their imagery first, or see them as images, or see them as before you see what they're representing. And so I like, I don't know, I just find that a great space to keep revisiting.
Do you find that working with magazines kind of makes you hyper aware of those weird intricacies, like the overlapping of images when you're searching through the pages and things like that?
Yeah. Especially like when you start to take into account. Sorry, I'm just open this again. Like some of the functionality of like how a magazine is laid out. The fact that you do have, like in this photograph, you've got that the crease that runs down the middle of this image. It was a double page spread, and so because the magazine is obviously has creases, that the crease is built into it, and then what that does to the way you see it. And so I think about it in relation to what we've been talking about tonight. The way you affect your surface through the making of it. I feel like the magazine kind of does that through its just its structure. And so often the folds will be at really odd spots on images depending on the quality of the magazine. Who made that choice, and why would you put the fold there? I can see that the photographer was probably wanting something else. But there you have it. There's a fold at that point. And it really kind of alerts to a different way of seeing the photograph beyond maybe what it was intended for in the first place.
So it's interesting. I mean, like, it makes you think of if you were ever going to make a photographic catalog in a book, whether the fold would influence what images you decide to put in it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, I have started using the actual physicality of the magazine
Right.
in sort of work that's coming up, like for the exhibition I'm curating for 2021 now. Sorry, I'm not good at doing two things at once, so I tend to so there, yeah, I'm actually playing with the physicality of these things, as these images, these bunches of images as objects, and locking down on the physical space of it. So they become these inaccessible images, which are kind of maybe trying to unlock the potential desire, so that it stays in this state of desire without ever deflating from that position.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, I love anyone. I think it's, anyone who's kind of playing with that sort of stuff in book design and magazine design. I just think it's genius. It makes images really interesting. And I guess that gets back to what I was talking about, saying, oh, it seems there are a lot of photographic artists, especially since about, I don't know, in my head, I say about 2011, that this kind of come to the fore of this kind of declaring the photograph as a surface first, by altering it in some way, by alerting you to its surface value, that there is surface only, before you then, and by doing that, you can then go into whatever it is they want to talk about, And I'm thinking of, Thomas Roof's a great example. I think he was a forerunner of that type of work. Christopher Williams, Annette Kelm, yeah, it just, there's so many, Lethal Wilson, people who are kind of, what you're doing, Guy.
Yeah.
Who are kind of you alerting to its photographicness as its calling card, so that we're not seduced by its representational quality, which kind of makes an interesting conversation, I feel like, in relation to photo 2021 and that kind of the broad theme of truth and stuff, and how does where does photography reside with that now? What is its function, or what is its role? Does it have a role in relaying the truth?
Yeah, I think it definitely still has a role, but I think it's just about being consciously aware of what exactly that truth is that it's conveying, and perhaps I think it's quite healthy to even question the authenticity of that truth. Like, well, I think a good example is kind of like what I was explaining before about, like, the information versus the artwork and what informs each other. But I also think about our current political environment, where you look at figures like Donald Trump, who almost uses truth as a kind of tool to manipulate, which is I think very clever, but also very scary. Even like the way that he's sort of coined or uses the notion, was it fake news or whatever it is, and then he places himself directly in the center of that, as kind of like master manipulation, but is very effective in the way that he uses Twitter and all these other things. So and that's kind of like that for me, that very much relates to the idea of photography and truth. question that. Yeah.
Yeah, because can I see about that? Yeah, that kind of rise of I don't mean a rise. I mean like the forms of especially in art. You know, the idea of fiction being a way to actually discuss truth
Yeah.
or discuss the world is easier, or more people are prepared to enter that space or you enter that space maybe with less suspicion because it's declaring itself as fiction, and then you're able to hear the discussion a bit easier than people who are entering in sort of from a factual position. And maybe that's some way we can kind of decipher our way through the photographic. And, because you do see how weaponized images have become in the hands of people like Trump and Putin and everyone else. You know, Instagram is just one mass weaponized photograph.
Right.
You know, where it's selling something. You know, and so the idea of a truth there is not necessarily the image of as truth, but more as the image as tool of someone else's agenda.
I mean, it's this kind of conversation, which again, you know, which is why I love photography, because it keeps on posing more and more questions. I think about, I'll just screen share again. And grab an older work. You know, this image here. Is all about that conversation about photography's relationship to the truth and the anxiety that kind of poses. You know, this work, you know, it's a bit, maybe you get it more of a sense of its scale in this image, is, you know, very large. And even the title of the work is called The Image. And it's essentially, you know, presenting this event, well, this, you know, this so-called event, but it's completely fictional. It's you know, it's completely sort of, you know, it's not a truth, but because of the way it's represented, it kind of poses questions about authenticity and all these things, but through the lens of photography. And
I think that's super interesting. You know, the fact that you take the photograph and you can just turn it on its side and it's you doing the turning. And that generates the idea of this event. And that's all you need, is the idea of the event. Whether the event occurs or not, it doesn't really matter. It's just an idea. I might at this point, oh, wow, we've been talking for a bit, Guy. Just for reintroduce or reinvite Elias to come back and join us. Hi, Elias, good to have you back with us.
Hi, thanks for this. I'm enjoying this conversation thoroughly. So to interrupt, we've got some questions from the audience that I thought we would jump into before we run out of time. So the first question is for Guy. It is from Jack Coventry, and he's asking, how do you view the relationship between the formality of your presentation versus the tacitly of the process?
I think it's tactility, I think is what he's...
Tactility.
Okay, typo there.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, I guess that question again sort of connects to what we were talking about. You know, I mean, my work is, you know, very tactile. It's made to be seen in person, and yeah, within the formalization of this conversation, it's been viewed via the screen. And I think it's that, you know, again, that thing about information, that this is again this is part of the work, this conversation, because it further informs it and further changes people's perception of it. So, you know, it's for me, you know, this is all part of the work, essentially.
Great. Guy, I've got another question for you
Mhm.
from Hugh Davis. He asks, where do you look for inspiration? And do you have someone who inspires you the most?
I get inspired by, I think, just living living life. I mean, like, I get inspired by the engagement in simply looking at images online. The physicality of scrolling through images inspires me. Um, I mean, in my opinion, we are so interconnected with images, and images are so ubiquitous, and everyone's a photographer in the sense that everyone that with the smartphone and all these things. So for me, to negotiate photography, the psychological aspect of it is very much to sort of talk about what it is to be human in a way. It sounds a bit pretentious, but I think there's some truth to that. But I get inspired by music. I get inspired by most of the ideas that I come up with. Sometimes it's just via walking around and looking at things, and then suddenly something pops into my head, which I can't quite put my finger on. Why, but I'm sure it's a mixture of different things. But the Dusseldorf School of Photography, as far as artists are concerned, is something that I've been very much inspired by. People like Thomas Ruff, obviously, who I've talked about. Also, Andrea Skursky. Lucas Blaylock is someone that I discovered when I was doing my honours year. You had him had a conversation with him, part of the Photo 2020, which is really great. So I think I'm inspired by artists who negotiate photography through a meta kind of dialogue, focusing on our relationship to images in general, which is essentially what I'm looking at in terms of my own work.
Great. Yeah, good list of people to be inspired by as well. And Lucas Blaylock will be presenting in Photo 2021, so look out.
Great
work of his. Kiron, we've got a question for you from Liam Denny. He asked, do you think some images desire to be more than others? What makes you pick and choose what gets to be translated?
Wow, that's a tough one. That's a great question. I mean, yeah, do some images desire to be more than others? I think maybe there's like this eternal fight amongst images to be the most desiring. I'm not sure, but for me, I guess it's the ones which speak to maybe a certain desire in me that I choose then to translate, so they speak a bit to what maybe I desire, and this sort of idea of touch, or trying to get beyond the surface, and is there anything, or is it just an abyss past there? And that the fact that images are so uncertain, I think, Guy, you've used that word, that they're great vehicles for questioning beyond themselves. And so for me, it's ones which speak that way. But I think you could make most images bend your way you want them to bend.
It's interesting that we sort of look at images in terms of a hierarchy, in a sense that the sharper the high resolution constitutes, the better the image. Whereas I think you and me, Kiron, we share kind of like, we almost make, well, what Quito style talks about is the poor image, which is kind of like the image which is the result of this industry, of the hierarchy, of the mass production of images.
The image which is kind of untethered, which is no longer linked to the world so clearly.
Yeah.
As a kind of follow-up, I was just curious about, you talk about magazines as being a source of inspiration. And while I'm a huge fan of magazines, through and have played an important part in my life culturally, they could be seen as a kind of an old media. Young people potentially might not see the significance in magazines that you see. I mean, do you find any allure in digital platforms at all, or is it the physical and the print and the pages that inspire you?
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest attractions of the magazine that I like is its finiteness. It starts and it finishes. I find the possible endlessness of the digital just sometimes I find it overwhelming. So I have started trying to navigate the digital in a way where I can put some parameters onto how, what can I look at, you know, in terms of images. But I do like, I think most photographers, actually all photographers probably secretly like rules and like having obstacles and boundaries that they operate in and try and find their way around. You know, these sort of absolutes, like the machine works in a certain way. Okay, let's see what it can do. And so there's something that attracts me about collections of images, and magazines are just a convenient collection. And I also I do like them as physical objects, but there's a finite to them. So, you know, they are a collection that I can then, that's all I've got to work with, and I limit myself with that. Whereas the online, I find like I could just keep going and just keep going. And
it's a already curated selection that you're already edited, that you're working within, I guess.
yeah,
I've got a few last minute questions that just come in, so I'll try and get through them all quickly. This is a question from Darren Tanitan, who has a question for you both. The terms photograph and image have been used both in everyday speech and in this talk rather interchangeably. Also, to throw into the mix another term which Kiron brought up, photographic objects. Could either perhaps speak more about the differences of each, if any?
yeah. Do you want to go, Guy? You go. This one.
Sure. I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, I think it's a question which is open for debate, definitely. For me personally, images more identify with, I suppose, maybe a digital kind of entity, but also a more of a broader context on photography, you know, different kinds of images. Whereas photographs for me more identify as the physical, sort of more the material aspects of photography, the physical print. That's how I see it anyway.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, Guy. In my head, I think I organize it that way as well. And I think the photographic object is maybe the expansion of that physical print when people are trying to create a three-dimensionality out of that space. That's when I come to the idea of photographic objects, and that goes other places as well.
I mean, you're both sort of operating at kind of like the edges of kind of an expanded view of what photography is and how you view it, and it feels, sort of hearing these answers, it's almost like the vocabulary around this still needs to be refined, perhaps, to be able to, for the layman, to be able to dive into this kind of conversation.
Yeah, apologies.
And understand the nuances and qualities of photography and image, and you know, that are being discussed here. So, you know, just a thought for.
Yes, you're probably right, Alice. We devolve, you know, Guy and I have known each other for a number of years, and we talk this way in a shorthand. But you're right. I think, but technology itself is moving so much more rapidly than it. Photographic technology is moving so rapidly that some of the old definitions, you know, that they're questioned by the changes, and so we're trying to find the language to frame the new that is coming out. And it just, but when you do it and suddenly you're already behind, something else has come out.
I think which is also why this is such interesting territory for you both as artists, and for many people exploring this at the moment. We have a question for Guy from Oliver Gray. He says, speaking about the growing symbiosis between our lives and technology, have you found that this has impacted your work and the messages you attempt to convey through it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I mean, Kiron was just touched on this before. Photography is inherently connected to technology. And so technology, you know, is just rapidly moving faster and faster and faster. And so this just generally just poses more and more questions about photography, which then, you know, feeds, you know, my own sort of work. You know, and I think, yeah, that's basically in the short answer, that's basically it. Yeah.
A couple of minutes left. Kiran, I just want to ask you very quickly, you are working on this exhibition that you're curating for Photo 2021 that's going to explore lots of these issues through the work of other artists. It's following on the back of exhibitions you've curated on a similar subject matter at Penala Art Gallery and West Space. Could you briefly speak to perhaps the trajectory of these exhibitions and where they're heading and why it's interesting for you, both as an artist and as a curator of other artists' work, to keep mining this territory in this way?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you said, Elias, this is the third curated exhibition I've done, kind of looking through some of these questions about the photographic condition and what is it, where's it going, and for me, it's personally really interesting. I find it really interesting, and I try to explore it within my own practice. But the real generation for the curating and putting these sort of exhibitions together is so kind of trying to create a collective conversation within Australia, especially asking these questions. I feel like these questions are being asked around the world for a number of years in sort of institutional settings, sort of, you know, like institutional gallery settings, and not just amongst individual photographers. But I feel like Australia, I was feeling a bit frustrated where the conversation around the photographic in Australia was, and you know, whatever the reasons being. And so I just wanted to start collecting these types of practices that I was noticing through my own research and stuff, and start trying to see what was the communal conversation. What are we all talking about individually? Where's the connection between us? And so, yeah, I had a couple of opportunities to do this, and it was, this is the third iteration of that. And so again, looking for these conversations, all these for these questions being asked in practices. So, you know, in this iteration, there are some people who have been in previous iterations, and they're coming back because there's a new type of context, or a different type of context, by adding in other voices. So, for example, Emmanuel Rodriguez, who is a painter I know, but he has a real question about photography and the photographic image. He just is working it out through painting, but it is a photographic question driving his paintings. And I thought it'd be interesting to bring that into conversation with someone like Janina Green, who's been working away at these questions for decades, and to provide a context for those two things to come into relationship with each other, and to see how, you know, painting and photography influence each other and speak, and ask a question about what is the photographic now, and how do we understand it? What is it being used for? How do we ask questions with it? And yeah, that's the real excitement for me, and why I enjoy the curating part of it, is just to kind of see what kind of context can we consider the photographic in, which I do see happening around the world, but not massively happening in Australia because of you know, whatever reason. I don't know why.
Do you see just to continue on for that, I'm just interested, do you see any connection between the way you curate images within a gallery and the magazine? Like for you, like, is there any, like, is it like for you, is it almost like flipping through the magazine, or is it no connection there?
Yeah, there's some part of that, and Yeah, I've worked with some really generous artists who have allowed me to do some very maybe unconventional things. West Space Show, I installed a whole lot of the work and then photographed it and then took it all away and put up put it all back as a wallpaper. So turned all the images back into images, and that was a big part of the show. And they're very generous for people to let me do that to raise some of those questions. But now I try and less interfere with their work so overtly and work out how things sit with each other. So yeah, there is an unfolding as you walk through the exhibition, trying to create questions that maybe cross-pollinate or alert to different things. I mean, I guess most curators try to do that.
There's very much a spatial experience happening when you're working in that three-dimensional space that you're within as a body, as a person traveling through it. Well, Kiron, I can't wait to see the show. That's opening at Sarah Scout Presents in February, Photo 2021.
Yes, looking forward to it.
Look forward to hearing much more about it and seeing it. That's all we have time for. Guy, Kiron, thank you. It's been fantastic. We'll be back on Thursday with another Photo Live, this time with Bangarang artist Peter Clancy, in conversation with Claire Needham, the curator at Bendigo Art Gallery. So I hope you can all join us back for that. But for this evening, Guy and Kiron, thank you once more.
All right, thanks, Elias.
Thank you.
Thanks, Guy.
Thanks.